To show you how easy it is to file a claim with Geico, we hired a scary movie victim.
Oh no, a tree fell on my car, and there's only one thing to do. Trip over my own feet and pull myself across the lawn while yelling help at a barely audible volume.
Sorry to interrupt, but you filed a claim with Geico, so you've got a designated claims team to help you.
This Geico sounds suspiciously reassuring. Are you sure I don't end up getting surprised with an unexpected twist?
Just that your Geico team will always be there to keep you updated.
No!
What is it?
Oh, nothing. I just didn't see that coming.
Geico. Great service without all the drama.
It is February 23rd, 2020, and at the Hallfield Broadfield Plantation, all of the spirits of all the slaves who died there gather in a straight line, standing erect. Some are disfigured, while others are missing limbs, eyes wide open, but missing pupils. There are children, even a few babies, and they all stare in the same direction, out there. Visitors to this site ignorantly walk past them. Not that the spirits would notice. They're all in some sort of trance. They solemnly watch as a young black man jogs when he should be running. Ahmad crosses the freeway and heads towards the construction site. There are only 5 streets in Satilla Shores. He couldn't help but look at all the houses along the way. He wondered what their electrical skeleton looked like. He couldn't help but fantasize about what his house would one day look like. Of course, he would ride the house himself. As he ran past several houses, he noticed some people. He waved a few times, but kept jogging, never realizing that the only response he got was unfriendly stares. Not only did he not notice the stares, he also did not see the Confederate flag hanging from a pole in someone's backyard. No black faces either. But Ahmad is oblivious. Between the joy he feels from running and the excitement of seeing Larry English's house, he has tunnel vision. The other thing that Ahmad is oblivious to is the dark cloud hovering above him, matching his every step. But for a moment, that darkness disappears. Ahmad has finally reached his destination. Once he makes it to the construction site, he takes his time looking around. It is important to know that many people of all races have been in and out of this site. And although it is technically trespassing, that is not a felony in this state, and no one would be arrested unless they actually stole something. He notices the wall and all the wood lying around. He sees stacks of metal, plaster, and random boxes. There's nothing of real value here. Ahmad continues to look around. As he does, he finds himself wondering, how long will it take to actually finish this place? Maybe he could come back when the construction workers are there. It would be cool to pick their brains a little. Content, Ahmad leaves the site and continues his run. As Ahmad runs, the sound of wind and whispers begin to grow louder. Ahmad hears something strange. He turns around but sees no one. But he starts to pick up his pace anyway. After a few more seconds, suddenly a chill runs down his spine, and finally something in the back of his head starts to ring the alarms. He looks ahead and sees a white pickup truck. There are 2 men inside. We know them as Gregory and Travis McMichael. They are talking to each other. No, they are talking to Ahmad. Actually, they are screaming at him. Welcome to another Shade of Crime, Satilla Shores, Episode 2. Minutes later, Ahmad was gone. No college, no marriage, no children. Gone. And now a number to be added to a statistic. Gone, but not alone. The spirits have come for him. They surround the body he once utilized. Then they wait. Wait for what they know is coming. They'd wait however long it took, because it was important to be here for the moment that happens. A delivered soul is like a newborn baby in its infancy. It's in need of comfort, warmth, and direction. Sometimes, if the death is especially violent and sudden, or if the victim was strong of heart, it can take a while. They will wait forever and will follow the body anywhere until the moment happens. They watch as the McMichaels discuss what has just happened. They are saying something about sticking to the same story of Ahmaud threatening them. They both nod in agreement as they plan. Or is it conspire on what to tell the cops? As they wait, police show up with the dreaded yellow tape. Officers, paramedics, and onlookers start to pollute the scene. Soon, the police separate the McMichaels and start interviewing them. A gurney is set up next to Ahmaud's body. The spirits look on. They have seen this before. What they haven't seen before is what comes next. A young woman shows up from a distance. She takes a picture of Ahmaud's corpse. The spirits look at this indignity with growing disdain. She is not with the police or paramedics. She's wearing simple street clothes. She takes a couple more pics. Who is she? And what is she up to? This is Lindsay McMichael. Yeah, she's the daughter of Gregory and the sister of Travis. And she will eventually take these pics and post them on her social media. What kind of fucked up family is this? It becomes clear they are preparing to position Ahmaud's body on the gurney and begin his transit. Luckily, it's at this moment that his spirit fights its way out of his body. It is embraced by the other spirits permanently doomed to haunt this land. That is until a transition, movement, or moment occurs that will only then release these souls from the limbo of this land and finally deliver them to their rightful place. Later that day, Ahmaud's mom, Wanda Cooper, is called by an investigator from GCPD. He tells her Ahmaud was involved in a burglary and that there was a confrontation between Ahmaud and the homeowners, and that in this confrontation, a struggle began and Ahmaud was killed. It was very matter of fact. It was said with the casualness of a mechanic informing her that her car needs a new muffler. It was flippant, and it was a lie. Ahmaud's dad simply said his son did not deserve to die in such a manner. Shortly after the shooting, the police called District Attorney Jackie Johnson once they realized a former police officer was involved. They wanted an outside opinion. 2 Glenn County commissioners would later say, Jackie Johnson said the McMichaels were not a flight risk, so no arrests were needed, thus preventing the arrest of the McMichaels. District Attorney Johnson would later reject this claim, saying, since when does a DA stop an arrest? She would also say she knew nothing about the case other than what a staffer told her, but based on what she was told, she thought there should be no arrest. When later asked about the state's citizen arrest rule, she claims to have had no idea how that works, which is odd. So, who exactly was Jackie Johnson? A proud Republican, Jackie graduated from University of Georgia Law School and the University of Georgia School of Business with a BBA in finance. She served as Assistant District Attorney for 12 years until she was appointed as District Attorney by the Governor Sonny Perdue in 2010. She was the first woman to serve as DA in her circuit. She was elected to the position in 2012. The District Attorney is in charge of 4 offices and 40 employees throughout the circuit's 5 counties. The District Attorney supervises the prosecution of 4,000 cases throughout the circuit year. Needless to say, all those cases do not go smoothly. She's been accused of disregarding the testimony of key witnesses, intentionally holding off court dates of defendants she had no evidence against, costing them jobs and peace of mind, with the end goal of forcing them into taking plea bargains. And then there's the case of Carolyn Small's death. Smalls led officers on a small speed chase in 2010. Although the 35-year-old mother of two was unarmed and pinned in against a utility pole, two cops, Corey Sasser and Todd Simpson, fired 8 bullets into her car, shooting her in the face and head. They never checked on her condition. Instead, they bragged about their shooting skills. She died a week later. Jackie Johnson presented this case to a grand jury. She made several mistakes, like giving the officer's defense attorneys the evidence before presenting it to a grand jury, allowing the defense attorneys to participate in the grand jury hearing by asking questions. And finally, she went before the grand jury without presenting an indictment for violations of Georgia law. Oh, and those two cops went free as birds. But one of the two men was not done with violence against women. On May 13th, 2018, Glenn County Police Department Lieutenant Corey Sasser was charged with battery when he tried to break into his estranged wife's, Katie Sasser's, house. He was released on bond, but quickly broke the terms of that bond by discharging a firearm in a 9-hour standoff with cops, and he ended up getting charged with felony obstruction of a law enforcement officer. But Jackie Johnson gave him bond again. By then, his estranged wife had decided to move on with her life. So, Corey, the mentally unstable man-child, plotted not only her death, but the death of her new boyfriend, John Hall Jr. On June 28th, 2018, the coward made good on his murderous plans and then killed himself too. How premeditated were his acts? Corey actually paid for his own funeral and cremation hours before the murder. Jackie Johnson knowingly let a mentally unstable man out on bond, ignoring evidence of his past behavior. This led to 2 senseless yet foreseeable murders, as well as 1 suicide. And Jackie Johnson had been dodging questions about the case ever since. Given the conflict of interest she has because of Gregory McMichaels being her lead investigator for years, Jackie passes on the case. So, on February 27, 2020, Jackie Johnson officially recuses herself. She would pass the case over to George Barnhill, a Waycross County district attorney. She calls herself doing a favor for the case, but in reality, she should not have had any interaction with this case at all once she recused herself. She contradicted the guidance in state's training for how DAs should handle conflicts. Once it becomes clear Jackie was not going to be involved with the case, Gregory decided he should get a lawyer just in case. So, he meets with a local defense attorney named Alan Tucker, although it was starting to look like he would not need a lawyer anyway. Because minutes turn into hours, hours into days, days into weeks, and still, there have been no arrests of Ahmaud's killers. No one had faith in this police department, and with good reason, too. Let's take a closer look at the Glenn County Police Department and the scandals surrounding them. Glenn County Police Department has a troubled history. This included a culture of cover-ups and abuse of power. A state-led investigation found extensive misconduct, including one officer having sex with a confidential informant. Also, GCPD Chief John Powell was indicted for perjury and witness tampering 4 days after the Arbery shooting. The chief is still on administrative leave. Not only him, but 3 other high-ranking officers are also enveloped in this controversy. Because of all these issues, multiple high-level criminal cases were now compromised. Not to mention recent accusations of mismanaging the evidence room and missing disciplinary records. There was a very real possibility that voters could decide to abolish the GCPD in the near future. Well, if they could not depend on local law enforcement, maybe Ahmaud's case would interest outside law enforcement. Well, the thing is, Georgia has no hate crime law. Neither does South Carolina, Arkansas, or Wyoming. Apparently, hate does not exist in those states. But in all seriousness, Georgia, out of all those states, should have this law. You would think after the Morris Ford lynching of 1946, it would have been demanded. In case you never heard of this infamous case, it kind of started when blacks returned from World War II. After fighting for America, they came back and were still being treated as second-class citizens. They began to press for civil rights, which the white supremacists did not like. So, in order to reestablish dominance, a series of lynchings began. In 1945, there were 12 lynchings in the Deep South alone. This was the atmosphere the U.S. was living in at the time. There was a sense of tension and doom anytime a confrontation between blacks and whites happened down south. Things could go from a scowl to a verbal confrontation to a murder in the blink of an eye. Now, on July 14th, 1946, near Madison, Georgia, a married couple, Roger and Dorothy Malcolm, got into a dispute with a local white farmer named Barnett Hester. The married couple were sharecroppers. For reasons that are lost to time and history, the couple were told to leave Hester's farm. It was around 6 p.m. that day. Well, things were said and tempers flared up. Roger ended up stabbing Hester in the back with an ice pick. Although Hester would survive, it would give him a lifelong injury that will trouble him the rest of his days. Hester's family members grabbed and held Roger until the Walton County Sheriff's deputies came and made an arrest. Roger Malcolm went to the Walton County Jail. Days later, a mob of white men met in Towler Woods. In the darkness of the woods, they schemed and plotted things that were too terrible to be spoken in the clear light of day. Roger Malcolm, however, received what seemed like a break on July 25th, 1946. A judge actually dropped his bond to $500, making it feasible for him to get out of jail while waiting to go on trial for the stabbing. Now, Lloyd Harrison, a wealthy landowner, agreed to provide the bail to get Roger out, but only if he works on his farm. Roger agrees. So Lloyd Harrison shows up at the jail with Roger's wife and 2 other sharecroppers, a black married couple, George, who was a World War II veteran, and Mae Dorsey. Harrison drives them all home, but on the way there, they stop on Morris Ford Bridge. There was a mob of white men waiting for them. The 2 couples were all taken out of the car, tied to a tree, shot, and killed. There were 60 shots fired at close range. Incidentally, this was Dorothy's birthday, and she was also 7 months pregnant. The lynchings received national coverage and universal outrage. There were large protests from New York to Washington. There was added anger at the fact that one of the victims was a vet. Even President Harry Truman was outraged. He created the President's Committee on Civil Rights. Truman introduced anti-lynching legislation to Congress, but was unable to get it passed. But the outrage continues as demonstrators march outside the White House demanding the end of these racist attacks. On July 28, 1946, when the funerals took place, there was still much coverage from national news organizations. And finally, there was a 3-week trial. But the grand jury could not find the culprits. To acknowledge the 73rd anniversary and keep the crime fresh in everyone's mind, on July 27, 2019, they actually did a reenactment at the location of the crime. Regardless of all these protests and reenactments, no one was ever convicted. It is a horrifying and infamous story of lynching. But even with its notoriety, it was not enough to pass a hate crime bill in Georgia. Ahmaud's mother had a conversation with District Attorney George Barnhill, who tells her he is waiting for a toxicology report on Ahmaud. This just seems suspicious to her, as if he was looking for an excuse to blame Ahmaud for his demise. She starts to look into Barnhill and discovers his son actually works in the same district attorney's office that Gregory McMichael worked in. This is a clear conflict of interest, so she demands his removal. On April 3, 2020, George Barnhill recused himself after Ahmaud's mom complained. He clearly felt insulted at her request. So, while she got what she wanted, he needed to have the last word. Barnhill wrote a disgusting letter practically blaming Ahmaud for his own death and accusing him of being mentally ill. Not only that, but he built this whole fantasy up in his mind where Ahmaud was the aggressor. He saw two armed men stalking him as terrified victims. So, for that reason, he saw no reason for anyone to charge the McMichaels. This is the same mentality that allowed the McMichaels to murder in broad daylight. They knew people like Barnhill would cover for them. Barnhill should have kept his politics to himself, which is why there's a protocol for district attorneys. Speaking of protocol, the National District Attorneys Association condemned his actions. They expressed concern that his handling of the case could prevent a just outcome. How can you trust that a jury had not heard about or read the letter where Barnhill trashes Ahmaud's life and basically says the McMichaels are innocent? And if a respected district attorney sees it this way, who are they? A jury to disagree? The association has 5,500 members and represents 2/3 of state and local prosecutors' offices. On top of that, he knew there was a conflict of interest the whole time, but never revealed it. Also, you don't recuse yourself, then give an opinion. And can I add one thing? Barnhill refused to pursue a conviction in this case, but had no qualms about going after a black lady named Olivia Pearson. She's a 58-year-old activist that helped a first-time voter properly cast a ballot. She did not try to influence any vote. She just helped this young person vote correctly. Barnhill prosecuted Olivia in 2 trials that lasted over 2 years. I'm not calling this guy racist, but on April 13th, 2020, a third prosecutor, Thomas Durden, of the Atlantic Judicial Circuit, took over the case. How was Larry English dealing with the events that were ignited at his construction site? He was gutted. Not only has he been getting death threats, but it was becoming clear it will be difficult to turn that house into a home. But the biggest emotion Larry feels is confusion. First, he did not recognize Ahmaud as one of the frequent visitors to his construction site. He also said Ahmaud never took anything from the site, and as far as he is concerned, Ahmaud did nothing wrong that day. The more Larry heard about the events of that day, the more he wondered why no one had been arrested yet. And English was not the only one who wondered about that. The weather and overall feeling of the town was one of tension and apprehension. As time marched on, one side of the town was outraged at the sense of growing injustice. Things were building in Fancy Bluff. Akeem was devastated by the death of his best friend, and he refused to let Ahmaud die in vain. But they were not getting the answers they wanted, and it just seemed like none of the law enforcement gave a damn. They were not about to let this go. Although it was becoming a struggle to get this kind of news coverage that would force authorities to take the murder serious, what they really needed was not local news. There had been some coverage locally. No, they needed national news coverage. Otherwise, are these cops really going to arrest a retired cop who worked for the DA? Especially when one of their own active cops deputized Gregory to deal with the trespassers? The other side of Satilla Shores had to hide their gratification in what they saw as justified shooting. They felt Ahmaud had it coming. And isn't it amazing how all of a sudden the robberies and thefts have stopped? He had no right to just wander around their neighborhood as if he lived there. And why was he on Larry English's construction site anyway? Never mind. The fact that tons of people had been in and out of that site and not one of them ended up dead Yes, it's unfortunate, but this is what happens when you can't control your kids. Now, they all knew not to trespass and commit crimes in Satilla's shores. Of course, they had to hide that sense of pride. Gregory in particular struggled to hide the pride in his actions. How do you keep getting slapped on the back and congratulated, yet always frown at the shame of what you had to do? It's a slippery slope. Gregory knew when to simply stop talking and nod in agreement, or in rare cases, disagreement. That takes skill. His son Travis had no such talent. After all, he was the shooter, a point he had no problem bringing up whenever it was mentioned. Travis seemed to be adapting to his fame quite well. Better than Gregory. Sure, he seemed fine during the day, but it was late at night that things would change. Gregory would have nightmares and then wake up, but the nightmares seemed to still be occurring. He would hear things. No, not the sound of Ahmad's final breaths or gunshots. He heard whispers. The first time it happened, he walked through his darkened house to see if anyone had the television or radio on. Nope. After that, he decided to go outside. This is when things got truly strange. What sounded like whispers now sounds like the wind. But it almost sounds like the wind is saying something to him. Well, no. It's more like the wind is angry at him. But it's unintelligible. Gregory looks up in the sky and notices their sky seems clear. Everywhere except above his house. This was so strange. Suddenly freezing, Gregory goes back inside, but can't manage to go back to sleep, so he just stays up. This continued off and on for the next week, but eventually it started happening nightly. It got so bad he had to start sleeping with earplugs. It works at first, but not for long. Is he imagining this? Gregory manages to sheepishly ask his son how is he doing. Travis flippantly affirms he's fine. No whispers or winds? Okay. Gregory begins to sleep during the day. His wife raises an eyebrow, but has learned to let Gregory have his eccentric little tics. Luckily, for Gregory, sleeping in the day seems to fix it, but slowly it begins again. Finally, Gregory has had it. Tonight, he will take the earplugs out and listen to whatever these whispers or winds have to say. So, later that night around 3 a.m., he manned up, went outside and faced his fear. What he heard was difficult to understand at first, but after recording it with his cell phone, slowing it down, and playing it over and over, it sounded like, to see, to shore, to survive. To survive, you'll need to show it. To us, this sounds strange, but Gregory knew exactly what the voice meant. He calls the lawyer he spoke to earlier, Alan Tucker, and asks him for a favor. Turns out there was a video taken of the killing of Ahmad by a third person named William Roddy Bryan. Bryan says he saw Ahmad running. He did not recognize him, so it caught his eye. But then he saw the McMichaels, who he does not really know, following Ahmad in a white truck. So Roddy grabbed a camera and jumped into his car and decided to start recording. What did he see? The video starts on the road leading up to Gregory's white truck. The camera dips and there seems to be the sound of the videographer cocking a gun. The camera pans up again and we see Gregory McMichael standing in the bed of the truck. Ahmad appears to run up to the truck. He seems to try and go around the truck when he is cut off by Travis McMichael, who is carrying a shotgun. Ahmad and Travis struggle over the weapon. A shot goes off. They briefly disappear off screen. When the two re-emerge, Ahmad has his hand on the barrel of the weapon while Travis still has the grip of the trigger. There are 2 more shots. Ahmad turns to run away but quickly collapses to the ground. The police saw the video right after the shooting. Another copy was given to Alan Tucker when he met with Gregory about the case. Gregory wants to release the tape. That way everyone will see that the shooting was justified. Tucker releases the video to a local radio station. That station uploaded it to their YouTube channel. After the decision to release the tape is made, Gregory stops hearing the voices. But the weather in the town continued to grow more hostile. Shortly after, on May 5th, the video of the killing emerged online. It set off protests nationwide. And because of the COVID pandemic, Americans were forced to stay home and watch all this coverage. Several high-profile figures will condemn the actions of the McMichaels. Former Vice President Joe Biden said, "The video is clear. Ahmaud Arbery was killed in cold blood." President Trump called it troubling and heartbreaking. And NBA superstar LeBron James released an angry text stating, "We're literally hunted every day. Every time we step foot outside the comfort of our homes. Can't even go for a damn jog, man? Like, what the fuck, man? Are you kidding me? No, for real. Man, are you kidding me?" Gregory thought releasing that video would save him, but it backfired. There was now widespread international outrage. This is what Ahmaud's supporters were hoping for. But let's remember the case of the Moores Ford lynching. All that outrage flickered out. This country has a short memory. But for now, let's just be grateful for that video. Thank God for William Bryan. He is the unsung hero here. On May 7th, 2020, the McMichaels were finally arrested. This was 74 days since Ahmaud's murder. The McMichaels showed up in their matching orange jail suits, looking completely shocked. Another interesting fact is that the father-son duo have different lawyers. How thick is that blood? Makes you wonder who would squeal first. The next day, on May 8th, supporters rally and run on Ahmaud's birthday. He would have been 26 that day. Wanda is relieved that her son's killers have been arrested, but she wants Roddy arrested too. In her bones, she knows what he did. Later that day, it was announced that our unsung hero, William Roddy Bryan, was also being investigated. He gets an attorney, Kevin Go. He reaches out to the media and says he is innocent. Roddy says if it wasn't for him, there would have been no arrest, and declares he will be the prosecution's top witness. He then says he and his fiancée, Amy, have been getting death threats. He says they are afraid to go home. It's not fair. He pleads with the Arbery family to understand that he is on their side and hopes he's not arrested because he barely knew the McMichaels and did nothing wrong. He claims he feels awful about Ahmaud's death, and he is not at fault. In fact, he can't be at fault because he's just a good old boy never meaning no harm. He loves NASCAR and enjoys rock and roll. Roddy repeats he is not now and never has been a vigilante. On May 9th, a video appears to show Ahmaud entering the construction site minutes before his death. On May 10th, the Georgia Attorney General asks for a federal investigation. This should have been done from the get-go. The next day, on May 11th, we learn that the Justice Department is considering whether or not to pursue a hate crime charge. Looking at the racial elements surrounding this case, a fourth prosecutor is added. It is Joyette Holmes of the Cobb County Judicial Circuit. She attended the University of Georgia in Athens, where she majored in criminal justice and psychology. She then got her law degree at the University of Baltimore School of Law in Baltimore, Maryland. Joyette then moved to Cobb County, Georgia, and opened up her own firm. After losing an election to serve in Cobb County Traffic Court in 2012, she eventually would serve as a prosecutor for District Attorney D. Victor Reynolds and solicitor Barry Morgan. In 2019, she was appointed by Governor Brian Kemp to serve as Cobb County's district attorney. Holmes is a Black lady with a Republican background, but still respected in the Black community. In fact, in November 2019, she was honored by the Cobb County NAACP at the 38th Annual Oscar Freeman Freedom Fund Gala. Put all that together and she was kind of perfect for this tricky case. On May 12th, the GBI, Georgia Bureau of Investigation, received a request from the state attorney to investigate the handling of this case. Essentially, everyone wants to know why this case was passed along like a hot potato, with no one giving it the respect or urgency it clearly needed. In addition to that, U.S. Senator Kamala Harris wrote a formal letter to Attorney General William Barr saying the federal government needs to independently investigate the handling of Ahmaud Arbery's case. She said, "It all fit a pattern of misconduct. Bottom line, what the hell was going on with Jackie Johnson and George Barnhill? And what was going on with the Glenn County Police Department?" On May 21st, 2020, William Roddy Bryan was arrested with the charge of felony, murder, and criminal attempt to commit false imprisonment. An investigation revealed his true motives. Turns out our friend Roddy is no hero. He conspired with the McMichaels, and not only did he record the confrontation as sort of an insurance policy, he actually hit Ahmaud with his truck. He then tried to box Ahmaud in and trap him, so he could not escape. Fuck this guy. And to add insult to injury, on June 1st, Special Agent Richard Dow was interviewing Roddy to find out if there was enough evidence to move forward with charges when Roddy revealed the last words Ahmaud ever heard. Those words came from Travis McMichael as his bullets slowly stole away Ahmaud's life. He stood over his victim and simply said, "Fucking nigger." But as awful as that is, maybe, just maybe, Ahmaud's death was finally going to alter things in Georgia. Because after decades of law enforcement intimidation, rape, murder, and outright lynchings, on June 23, 2020, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp signed a hate crime bill into law. This will allow judges to impose sentences to increase punishment against those who target victims based on perceived race, color, religion, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, gender, mental disability, or physical disability. And if you find yourself in Brunswick, Georgia, you won't feel the hostile weather. And if you visit Hallfield Broadfield Plantation, you won't hear any sounds of suffering or see any ghosts. And thankfully that peace spread to the rest of the town. The town's atmosphere wasn't the only thing changing. Ahmaud's death, along with the death of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, would send shockwaves all over the world. From Japan to France to Germany, for the first time ever, the whole world was screaming that Black Lives Mattered. It was unprecedented. Momentum was building to something that could, with a little luck, resemble actual progress. The trial for Ahmaud's death is expected to start later this year or in early 2021. We will be following the case closely and will continue to tell the story until its completion. Thank you for listening. This has been Another Shade of Crime. If you enjoyed this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe. Another Shade of Crime is written and produced by James Hayes, co-produced and sound design by Liam Fox O'Brien, sound engineered by Ryan Majoris, and narrated by Carl Ellis Grant.
Not to be dramatic, but I'm obsessed with how much I just saved at Kohl's. I got 25% off Nike clothes for the kids, the cutest $39.99 flex hoodie for me, and got great Columbia gear for all our outdoor adventures. Did I mention the extra 20% off and the Kohl's cash I got? So yeah, not sure what I love more, fall deals or fall weather. Select styles, 20% offer ends October 3rd. Some exclusions apply. See store or Kohl's.com for details.
Streaming only on Peacock, Ghislaine Maxwell had it all until she met Jeffrey Epstein.
Ghislaine Maxwell's charged with enticement of minors, sex trafficking of children, and perjury.
Epstein's Shadow, Ghislaine Maxwell. Streaming now, only on Peacock.